For more on this issue, I'm joined by Ed Rogers, CEO of Rogers Investment Advisors. Ed, good to see you again. Let me talk about Abenomics for a moment here, then we'll talk a little bit about the future. But did it work, first of all, is the first question.
Yeah, that's the question on everybody's mind. And in fact, Abe is going back to the people of Japan and asking them that same question. He's having a referendum on Abenomics, sorry, with this vote. Our view is it's somewhat mixed. Has he changed the global view of Japan as the ailing economy that simply can't and never will? Absolutely he has. There is further investment from outsiders, and there's been a tremendous amount of, we think, local structural reform that isn't quite credited in the press as widely as it should be. So on that level, it's been a success. On the other hand, there are some very sensible proposals put forward to improve immigration policies, use TPP to reform Japan agriculture and some of the vested interests in Japan that have really held back the Japanese economy. And there hasn't been significant change in those areas. We're hoping that, well, we think that he will win this election. We don't think there's any real credible opposition at this point. But the question is, if he gets remandated, if you will, on Abenomics, does he now use the political capital that he will have gained to go out and attack some of those structural reform issues that have proven to be harder to conquer than I think we all believed about a year and a half ago when this whole process started?
Yeah, Ed, this recession that we've been talking about, I mean, it's a bit surprising, first of all, because the rest of the world seems to be coming out of recession, not going into recession. And the blame apparently from the Abe folks is that this is the fault of the sales tax hike. Is this true?
Certainly that has had impact. There's no doubt about it. That affected personal spending decisions that led to a significant increase in Q2 and a decrease in Q3 in personal spending. But I don't think that's the full story, to be perfectly honest. It's convenient to lay all the blame at the doorstep of the value-added tax. But let's be honest, the structural reforms that have been promised have not fully come through yet. The amount of political capital spent, for example, on making sure that Japan agriculture is reorganized sensibly under TPP simply hasn't happened. Immigration, meaningful immigration, has not happened. Women in the workforce has actually been a very successful part of the policy. We've seen over 800,000 women join the workforce, I believe, since the Abenomics focus brought to bear on women in the workplace. So again, it's sort of a mixed review, but some of the biggest ticket items in structural reforms, he has not spent the political capital that he needs to spend to get these difficult changes, these difficult structural changes in place.
Ed, the headlines are saying that they want the sales tax basically to be delayed further. I mean, essentially they're insinuating that it's the fault of the sales tax that they're in this recession. If they are successful in delaying the sales tax for a while, does that solve this recession? Does it make the recession a little less and we can move on from there?
Well, I'm of the view that killing inflation is the #1 problem that needs to be, that's the war that needs to be won. Defeating inflation once and for all. 20 years of deflation, the psychological impact and the financial impact of deflation have been absolutely devastating on this country. If we run an expanded balance sheet for a number of years and the deficit gets larger in the context of defeating deflation, that's okay. Everything else is kind of peripheral to that single most important goal.
Ed, is this a Japan problem, or do I need to worry about the rest of Asia?
I don't think you need to worry about the rest of Asia. I think you need to worry about how Europe is dealing with its problems, because they seem very similar to a point in time where the Japanese were, and they seem similarly paralyzed at the political level as far as solving their problems. The rest of Asia is frankly more dependent on how China is doing and also how the United States is doing. And there's a lot of good news. The U.S. economy is thriving. We think China is sort of bottoming out and for a variety of political reasons is now going to start to perform much better going forward. All of this will be good for Japan and also good for the rest of Asia. So we don't think it's a case that Japan catches a cold and Asia gets pneumonia.
Yeah, this snap election, I mean, and some of our folks here, we were talking about this earlier, that, you know, why the election, given the fact that most of the polls and most of us suspect that Abe would win overwhelmingly anyways. So it sounds like there's a lot more politics here involved than perhaps meets the eye. What's the purpose? He does the election, he gets his mandate. What's 2.0 look like?
Yeah, I agree with that assessment very much. It's a political move. I think as far as the VAT, he never really owned that. That was somebody else's policy and somebody else's plan. I would like to see him use a remandate, if you will. We all think he's going to win the election for sure. And we'd like to see him use that political capital to address some of the fiscal problems in a different way. Maybe the 2% sales tax was one way of addressing the deficit, but there are other ways to more sensibly do this potentially in the long run than simply saying the VAT is our answer.
And
so,
Ed, I got time for one more question. I'm sorry, Ed.
Sure.
Do I want to be buying Japan, or do I want to be selling assets in Japan right now on the backdrop of this snap election, even though we know nothing dramatic should be happening?
We're not a favor of long-only investing, but the Japanese hedge fund space has been incredibly fruitful for us. Over the past 8 years, the fund of funds we advised has only had one negative year, which was 2011. So we're pretty confident that we'll continue to make money in this environment. There's enormous opportunity when you have changes of these sorts coming through the system, and there's a lot of uncertainty about how the changes will actually work their way through. That's an opportunity for us as investors. It's a great opportunity.
All right, Ed. Well, whenever there's chaos, there's always opportunity there. Ed, good to see you again. Thank you very much for joining us live from Tokyo.